tell yourself the stories you want to hear. So this week, I'd like to get right to the meat of things by asking you to practice bringing some conscious attention to the stories you're telling yourself about money, or time, or love, or anything else. So what stories do you tell yourself and others about money? What stories do you tell yourself and others about time? What stories do you tell yourself and others about life? What stories do you tell yourself and others about your dreams? What stories do you tell yourself in your head? And what stories do you tell externally or out loud to others? Do they differ? Just notice. Do you complain about everything being so expensive, or complain that people or companies are trying to rip you off by charging whatever it is that they've decided to charge? Do you complain about the cost of things these days and complain about money and the lack of it all the time? Do you say things like you wish money didn't exist? Do you talk about money as if it's scarce or it's against you or it's bad or it's at the root of all the world's problems and of all your problems? Just begin to bring more consciousness to this. Notice when you catch yourself in it. Where did those stories come from? Are you just repeating it because it's all you've ever heard? And do you want to continue it? Now, please hear me. That if you have these thoughts and views and you say these things, this is not a judgment on those things. Because we are all absolutely stewing in this money mindset in this world. And most of us have been raised to think and behave that way about money since birth. So this is not to shame anyone about those views or to make them wrong. It is just to pose a question for you to consider. And that question is, how do you think speaking about money this way affects your relationship and experience with money? How do you think that relationship with money affects your whole life? If you're not sure, let me ask you another question. If you had a partner, a wife, or a husband, and you constantly complained about them being too much and not enough and wishing they didn't exist and talking about them like they are against you, they are holding you back, they are withholding you and at the root of all the world's problems and all of your problems, how do you think that relationship would go? Not very well, right? Not very well at all. How could it when you view it and speak of it that way? The same applies to your relationship with money and your relationship to anything and everything. Because how you think and speak about things is how you experience them in you. Everybody knows that if you want human relationships to change, you have to get clear on what you want instead and how you want to feel instead, and you have to speak it and change your previous ways. And set that intention to create that love and mutual respect. It is the exact same with your relationship to money. Maybe you don't tell yourself that story about money, but you tell it about time. Or maybe you tell it about love or support, that there's not enough of those either, that they're scarce too. That you have to do everything yourself and you're totally unsupported and you can't trust anyone and there's never enough time, etc., etc., etc. If you are reading this post or listening, it's because you already know on some level that this universe is creation in motion and you are that. If you're reading this or listening to this, you already know or are beginning to get in touch with the fact that you are a creator. You are creation, created, creating. And now you are just bringing more consciousness to what it is you are creating, instead of creating based on old unconscious patterns. So I just have one question for you. Do you want to keep telling yourself these old stories? Or do you want to tell yourself some new ones? Do you want to have a different experience with money, with time, with freedom, with your work, your loves, your talents, your relationships, and your dreams? Then just start bringing conscious awareness to the stories you've been repeating unconsciously. Because when you do that, you begin to have a choice. Before that, you didn't have a choice because you were simply and innocently not aware of the stories you were just repeating by default like an old tape. But once you see it, once you see those patterns, you do have a choice. And you can begin to disrupt that pattern and create something new. So what stories do you want to tell yourself now instead? Write them down. This takes them out of your head and makes them real in the physical. This is so important. Write them down. Whatever those new stories are. Even if you don't believe them yet, write them down how you want it to be, and then follow every breadcrumb that shows up on your path after that to guide you. And you will begin to experience a new reality with that old thing you thought would never and could never change. You must have persistence in this, though. Those old patterns and stories are going to keep popping up. But if you keep recommitting to a new story, you will begin to start living that new story in ways that will honestly blow your mind at times. And as always, if you'd like some help and ongoing support with that, I invite you to join me in my Feast or Famine No More course. Have a peek and check it out and see if it calls to you at sunnychapman.com/feast. And if you'd like to get these posts to your inbox every Sunday, you can do so and get my free How to Make More Doing Less guide at sunnychapman.com/more.